Let's talk about dementia, because it's a horrible illness. You can get it through old age or through being on medication all your life. And some people might just sit there happy with a family, just slowly losing their mind. Others might become aggressive and violent. It's a bit hard to tell. Sometimes maybe they quite want to become aggressive and violent later. But I usually find, based on my own experience, that there's always early signs of what a person will be like when they get older. Because when you get a person who's young displaying certain paranoid attitudes and they try and control it and keep it, keep it down when they're younger, when they get dementia, they can't control it anymore. It just becomes more common. And I've seen that time and time again. My mother, for starters, she had far too many tablets because of her heart surgery she had, and by the by the time she died, she had really bad dementia, in my opinion, medical induced dementia. She's coming out of all kinds of hurtful things about me, to the point where I had to change my phone number to stop her yelling abuse at me every half an hour, every single day of the week. So it is quite nasty. It is. It makes it very difficult to think nice thoughts of my mother at the moment. Says I mean I can't even look beyond when the abuse started, but I do know my dad managed to keep a lid on it when he was alive, and it was only after his death that all of that toxicity started coming out. But even my dad found it difficult, and he was on antidepressants in the end, so it must have been hard for him as well. So yeah, you can't always look at people and think that's the way it is, because sometimes one person is doing more than their fair share to keep everything in order, and you don't realise until they're gone and all the floodgates open. But dementia patients, yeah, you try to convince them of anything, you've got maybe 30 seconds to a minute to do it before their mind resets back to the original point. Kind of a perpetual groundhog day. So trying to convince them is just absolutely pointless. You could be there for 2 or 3 hours talking about the same things over and over again. And at that point, you might think they're deliberately being awkward, they're deliberately being arses, or two faced, or whatever you want to think. Then you start getting angry and you start yelling at them. And they'll remember you yelled at them, right? And you'll think, oh, you heard that then, did you? Right? And you'll generally think that you're just being messed about. But the truth is, they really don't remember what you said a couple of minutes later. If you just calm it down and wait a little bit, they'll forget whatever you said, and it'll go straight back to the original point. So trying to talk them around doesn't work. It never has. It's one of those things you do with right-minded folk, whether they're good or bad. It won't work with dementia patients. If you try saying no to them, you can't do that. After a lifetime of them doing what they like, they will think you're being nasty. Even when they're talking about doing something that would literally cause their deaths, they will think you're being nasty. They're old enough to look after themselves. What the hell are you talking about? Say, don't you think I've been wiping my own ass for decades already? I don't need you. Now I just want to walk across that railway track with the trains coming. You know, that kind of thing. I've had to rescue dementia patients, who had that attitude before today. And I can tell you now, right, it says they still don't believe a word of it. It's only when they're cold and wet and in the middle of the country and they've got nowhere they can go and they've got no clue what happens next and they're confused, do they settle down and just wait, because they run out of ideas. Their brain can't connect reality with what their fantasy is. So you can't say no to them because they just get angry. Some of them get violent and they become abusive. Instead, the only way to deal with dementia patients is to go along with whatever they're saying. If they say Elvis is alive and living next door, you say, yes, I just had a cup of tea with him. He said hi, then returned me to sender. You have to go along with their delusions. Says it's the only way that you can maintain a civil conversation with them that doesn't end with them forgetting everything that was said. Because they tend to remember, they tend to be fixated on one point. And that one point is what it could pop into their mind 1 minute, and that'll be it for the rest of the day. That's what they want, and when they get it, it drifts away. They're just sort of like they're happy as a lark. So you have to go along with that point in order to get along with them. So if they're talking about going on holiday, you make plans to go on holiday with them. If they're talking about yesterday's bus trip that actually happened 20 years ago, you talk about it as if it happened yesterday. Because these are the ways you get along with dementia patients. Because at the end of the day, it says they deserve a little dignity in their old age, and just because their mind is making that difficult doesn't mean you can't supply it. Because they hang on to things and they do hurt. They're not emotionless. They still feel. And if they miss their family, it is heartbreaking for them. You see them crying sometimes, at the thought of what they've lost. Because deep down they know something's wrong. But because it's in the mind, it's very hard to tell what. Because if you have something wrong up here, you will never realise. Says it's very difficult. It's only when you catch yourself going, why did I do that? And a dementia patient never will do that. So, dementia is a really cruel illness. And the only way to deal with it is to go along with it. And if you actually try to deal with it any other way, you'll just be banging your head against the wall or creating a cycle of violence. One thing you should never do is assume they're being deliberately awkward, because the chances are when they say one thing and then contradict themselves the next minute, they don't even remember what they said. They generally don't remember. It's not a case of disrespecting you or lying to you or any of that. They generally don't remember anything that was said previously. And like I said, persuasion rarely works. It is a type of Groundhog Day. You can't persuade them, so you just have to talk nonsense about whatever they're fixated on. Because that works, that calms them down, that maintains control, and it gives them a sense of, a sense of being in the right mind, in the right world, with everybody else on the same page, even though they may actually be on Venus or someplace like that. But yeah, dementia's a cruel illness, so let's try and give those with it a little dignity and just go along with their little delusions, because they can't help it. See you in the next one.